human beings create environmental degradation by consuming too much, and the poor are forced to overexploit what meager resources are left.
Let's look at agriculture. Inquire why they replace complex, stable ecosystems with really simple, vulnerable ones.
When we produce food, we intentionally eliminate all the plants and many of the animals that are present in that land area and plant a single monoculture of our crop, and then, of course, spend large quantities of money to protect that crop from various pests that are present in there. And so it is our intentional effort in agriculture to simplify to produce a crop. We are losing a great many species of plants and animals in the United States and elsewhere in the world by this simplification. And in fact, if I were to select one single major factor for the elimination of various plants and animals in the world, it has been due to agriculture.
Do they have any religion that justifies and explains that kind of exploitation of the natural world?
Yes, they call it economic growth.
We certainly are economic people, and that's very sad because economics, although it's essential, every society, every human society has economics, generally our people miss the point that the economic system is utterly dependent on the functioning of Earth's ecological systems. And so we're focusing on the wrong part of the system, and the functioning of the economic system is likely to destroy its own supports, which is something that has all smart human beings very worried.
But the reason for this is very simple. The origins of all our wealth is the planet. That is the basis from which we derive all our wealth. Whatever we might like to think about our technological marvels, we still have to start with the Earth as the base point. And that means that we need to reassess our concepts of wealth if we're to learn to live in harmony with the planet.
When did all this industrial technology begin?
Only about 200 years ago, when what the human beings call the Industrial Revolution began. Since then, they've utilized an increasingly sophisticated technology. They've mined and smelted metals, drilled for and cracked oil, extracted and burnt fossil fuel. They're doing all kinds of ecologically vulgar things. And like population, it's a progress, if that's the right word, that's been accelerating.
Logically, that can't continue indefinitely.
I don't think they care too much for logic. That doesn't suit their immediate demands.
It's only since the Second World War, for instance, that people have been obsessed with concepts of growth, obsessed with the notion of gross national product. Before that time, other considerations, non-economic, non-materialistic considerations, were a very important part of the political process. Today, politics equals economics. And that, I think, means we've got a very impoverished culture, a very impoverished society, because we think down one narrow furrow. We don't think at all about some of the broader social and human issues.
Well, despite that, they seem very committed to this economic growth business.
A lot of human beings believe that increasing wealth is the only way of enabling all human beings, including the 2/3 of them that are now very poor, to enjoy a decent life.
And the notion that economic growth will somehow allow us to bring new resources, new wealth to the poor people today is, again, a complete illusion. The gap between North and South, for instance, is widening every year. The gap between rich and poor, even in industrial countries, is not narrowing. And the fact of the matter is that if you base your system on the pursuit of wealth and emphasis on competitive values, then you're always going to have a system in which some are the winners and some are the losers.
How big are the discrepancies?
Huge. There are 1 billion human beings living in great squalor and poverty on Earth, a figure that's growing every year. Perhaps 20 million of them die each year from hunger and diseases caused by malnutrition. Most of them are children.
What about the wealthy?
Well, a handful of human beings are given enormous sums of money for just singing or pretending to be someone else. 2/3 of the wealth, taken from nature by humanity, goes to less than 1/5 of its numbers. On average, human beings in a place called America are 50 times more wealthy than those in a place called India.
The great wealth of the United States is not because Americans are such wonderful people, but largely because of the wonderful deep agricultural soils of the Middle West that the Americans are now wasting. So natural resources, the distribution of natural resources is very important in the distribution of wealth. But added on top of that, of course, are the political and economic systems, the nation-state systems, which human culture has developed, and which means that the wealth that we have is far from being spread more evenly than it is geographically is actually spread less evenly. That is, we could cooperate so that everyone on Earth could live roughly the same kind of decent life regardless of their physical situation. But instead of doing that, we do things that make the maldistribution of wealth much worse through our political and economic systems.
What is a nation?
You're not going to believe this. Armaments, together with the extraction and exploration of oil, are the human beings' two largest industries. They're spending more on military activity than they spend on either health care or education.
Exactly what is it spent on?
Armies, navies, and air forces. Lots of human beings, most of them male, spend all their time preparing and training for war. The most powerful nations spend astronomic sums on nuclear weapons and their delivery systems.
What's the logic behind that?
Mutually assured destruction.
I think you misheard me. I said logic.
The idea is that if each side is capable of wiping the other out, no one will go to war.